Hey everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. This is the third of the three kind of announcement, interesting kind of things that Kevin Feige has talked about recently. You can check out the previous ones on Nova and Mutants up on the channel already. But Kevin Feige had a really interesting and important quote that I think it's worth kind of talking about. It's an idea that I feel like I've been a champion of within the MCU and with these movies for a while. But he says, and this is talking about superhero fatigue and whether or not kind of like the MCU, the upcoming DC stuff, there's so much superhero stuff out there right now. Is there superhero fatigue? He argued that it's more the feeling of having to do homework fatigue. It feels like maybe you have to watch everything to fully get the scope. I would argue that in the MCU, that hasn't ever really been the case. And that's part of what I think is breaking some people's brains right now. But he continues, these are all individual stories meant to be enjoyed as singular entities. The connectivity is a bonus and something that a lot of people like. Now, as somebody who's deep into Marvel and into the MCU and working my way back up in like the comics to kind of regain my knowledge in that and to fill in history of years that I just hadn't ever read comics for. I'm one of those people who likes the interconnectivity and likes those Easter eggs, those nods, and things like that. But I think coming out of Infinity War and Endgame, there was this mindset that, ooh, Marvel has just told this big story. This about 10 years of story, and it all connects together. And sure, there are elements of that in, like, Captain America, the First Avenger. We're learning about, well, what turned out to be one of the Infinity Stones. And then we have another Infinity Stone pop up in Thor the Dark World, and then Guardians of the Galaxy. There is this interconnectivity, this little bit of weaving stuff together out there. But the big thing is, each of those stories stood on their own. Now, some of them don't stand well. Like Thor the Dark World does not stand well as a story. It's actually better to look at that one in the whole picture because it's part of that journey and that growth for the character of Thor, who is one of the better developed characters, who has arcs of character development, regression, and goes through real kind of emotional things within the MCU. But as a standalone movie, Thor the Dark World, not that great. And I think for a lot of people, I think for some people, and I said a lot of people there, I think for a lot of vocal people, there was an expectation coming out of Infinity War and Endgame that everything Marvel was going to do was going to be connected. And this was not helped by the change in CEO, Bob Iger leaving, Bob Chapek taking over, because Bob Chapek wanted to have that bigger scope, to be able to announce 30 things and get people excited for all 30 of them at once, which is not how Marvel had done business. And now, I think with the slowing down of stuff, obviously we gotta wait and see. Gotta see how things like Captain America, Brave New World, and others are going to tell their own individual story. But to me, this is such an important quote because I feel like so many people have lost that kind of path. lost that mindset of, can I enjoy this movie for what it is? Can I enjoy this show for what it is? Anything that ties together is an added bonus. The question is, does this one thing, this particular thing that I'm watching now, tell an interesting story that works? And I think with the announcement, like I said, of Everything All at Once, I think there's an element of that that got lost because people started to look at it and go, oh yeah, this is all for the multiverse saga. We got the multiverse saga, and everything's going to fit together. Everything's this little piece to a puzzle that's going to create this end multiverse thing. And we're paying so much attention to this little piece, this 5 seconds, this 3 minutes of one movie, this 30 seconds of one episode, to be like, that's the key. That's what we got to focus on, because that seems multiversal. How's that gonna work together? Okay, if we take this 30 seconds here, this 5 minutes here, this 2 minutes here, this hint that was dropped here, this other thing here, how are all of these going to tie together to get us to Secret Wars? And we've lost sight of the idea of, well, what story was trying to be told in this movie? And honestly, I think some of them, the deeper you look at them critically for that, I'll give Thor Love and Thunder as an example here. I think you're going to find that it doesn't tell that much of a story. It might be very entertaining at times, but it kind of lost the story element, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. But I think Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, there was such an expectation, and I'll even say Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, there was such an expectation that these movies were going to be critical pieces for the multiverse saga. And in particular with Quantumania, I think there was this really negative reaction to the movie because it didn't fit that mold. So it's just an interesting thing to think about, and more so than anything, whether or not you agree with Feige's kind of premise that it's the homework fatigue versus superhero fatigue. Obviously, I kind of glossed over that. But I think, and I'm going to say this, if you're looking for the movies to always set up the next thing, to find that puzzle piece that's going to help you put together the picture of Secret Wars, the MCU is never going to be as good as it once was. Because, and this isn't because they dropped all the perfect Easter eggs and all the perfect clues, and we were all tracking to the Infinity Saga and where it was going to end up. That was certainly not the case. I mean, a lot of the movies don't have anything that really ties them forward besides giving us characters. And if you can stop yourself, and this is the case for myself as well, though running this channel as well as then the 10-Minute Marvel podcast, I do have to think about the implications of that and about how puzzle pieces might fit together going forward, because that's some of the talking points we have. But I also, and I think this is more important for me and really important for me to remember, is when I sit down to watch a show or when I sit down to watch a movie, I have to live in the moment of that show or of that movie. I can go back and dissect and pick apart all the little things about where they might be leading, the Easter eggs that might have been left, the nods to comics and stuff like that. I can do that all later. But if I'm too focused on that in the moment of watching the movie, I'm going to lose out on the enjoyment of watching the movie. And as Kevin Feige said, and I'll just end with this. These are all individual stories meant to be enjoyed as singular entities. The connectivity is a bonus and something that a lot of people like. I could have just stopped with the connectivity is a bonus, but make sure you get I like to get the full quote in there. So just let that resonate with you as you sit down and watch Deadpool and Wolverine coming up here. And if you enjoyed this content, please do click the thumbs up button. Leave a comment on your thoughts on this. Do you find yourself falling into the trap or the mindset of, ooh, what's the next thing? How does this tie together? Or can you sit down and enjoy it in the moment for what it is? Check out the previous videos we have and subscribe to know whenever we put up new content. But with that, if you're enjoying this content, we also have the podcast 10 Minute Marvel. You can find links for that down in the description below, as well as wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcasts from. But with that, we'll see you next time.